Time now for Keller at Large. Here's John.
Thanks very much for joining us. As or more important than listening to what the politicians and the talking heads say is listening to what the voters are saying. And there are a variety of ways to do that. Analyzing polls and election results, well, that's useful, but so is what our guest this week does. Diane Hessen is a well-known local entrepreneur who 8 years ago compiled an email list of hundreds of correspondents around the country with whom she has maintained a regular dialogue. Those conversations produced her 2021 book, Our Common Ground, Insights from 4 years of listening to American voters. She joins us now with an update. Diane, great to see you.
Good to see you, John. Nice to be here again.
So before we dig into some samples that you sent me of what your folks are saying at this very interesting moment, to say the least, you wrote 4 years ago when the book came out that, quote, the path to healing our divided nation is both simple and profound. We must turn down the heat. We must begin to listen, to stop presuming, to try to understand, to treat each other with dignity, and to know that most Americans are not crazy radicals, end quote. That was 4 years ago. Have we gone forward, backward, or not moved at all?
Well, look, I think in terms of what's going on the surface and the divisiveness, it feels like things are worse. We haven't turned down the heat. You know, I begged in my book to turn down the heat. Lots of other people have said that, and I just don't think that it's worked. You know, the number one culprit here, and we can get into this when you share some of the quotes, but the number one culprit here is social media, which really amplifies the voices of those crazy people. Mm-hmm. And when you see a video, I mean, if you're a Democrat and you see one 20-second video of Charlie Kirk saying something despicable, mm-hmm. you decide that you know who Charlie Kirk is. You know, if you're a Republican and you see a comment from a Democrat that says it's a good thing that, you know, we have one more terrible person who's gone from our country, mm-hmm. and you read that and all of a sudden you start getting these voices in your head saying, I've got to do something about this because the other side is bad.
So the solution is to ban social media.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, one thing I would do is, this gets really geeky, but you know, there is this Rule 230, which protects social media companies from, you know, having to take responsibility for what their algorithms are feeding us.
Right.
And no one's gotten rid of that rule yet. So there are things that we can do, but of course, you know, you do start thinking at some point, shouldn't we all know that some of the insane stuff that we're reading is actually not what mainstream Americans feel and think? But for some reason, it just gets everybody hyped up.
Well, it certainly didn't help that we were all isolated indoors during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And setting that aside, yeah. It doesn't help that, you know, commutes are longer, yeah. People are isolated in their cars and so forth. Yeah. It's almost like we've just lost the thread of connection that transcends this shallow, uber provocative connection that social media provides.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there are two things you can do that would reinforce what you're saying. One is go on the T or walk around the city or whatever and just look at people.
Or go to DD, hang out at DD for a while and talk to the people there.
Yeah. Or don't even talk to people, just go anywhere and you'll see that the large proportion of people, even if they're outdoors on Boston Common on a beautiful day, are sitting like this with their phones. Yeah. So people really are addicted to looking at videos and reading this stuff. The other thing I would tell your listeners to do is go online, look at social media, and find a comment that is particularly despicable from someone who's not well known. Just somebody saying something really horrific. And then look at the profile of that person. And for the most part, there's like a cartoon character on their photo, and they have 4 followers.
It's a Russian bot.
It's Russia, it's China, or whatever. I mean, if you can't beat us
they're messing with us.
On economic grounds or whatever, if you wanted to really sow the seeds of discourse and really hurt the United States, you'd have a lot of people out there pretending there's some American from Kansas saying absolutely horrible things, and then we're all sitting on Boston Common horrified at what we're reading. And I think that dynamic makes things crazy.
They're having a field day with us. All right, I do have to take a break. When we come back, we'll dip into what some of Diane's correspondents around the country and right here in Massachusetts are saying in the wake of the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk. So please stand by. We'll be back with more in a moment. Stay with us. To our conversation with Diane Hessen, the author of Our Common Ground, Insights from 4 Years of Listening to American Voters. Okay, Diane, you sent me a bunch of quotes from your latest batch of emails. I'm going to read briefly from a couple of them. Susan from Massachusetts, a self-described strong Trump supporter. She says she's devastated by the murder of Kirk, disgusted by people who celebrated that murder, but, quote, it's not an issue of Republican versus Democrat, trans versus non-trans. Both sides of this divide are unwilling to be open to discussion and compromise. And so hold that thought. Barbara, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, quote, the right is complaining about people not having more sympathy or even celebrating the murder, but they were fine with Trump and his son making fun of Paul Pelosi and Nancy. Our nation's in a very bad place right now, and it's only going to get worse. Are they both right that the divide is not going to close because people don't want it to, and that things are going to get worse?
Hey, I don't know if they're right. I mean, all I do is get lots and lots of data from these people and do the analysis. What I do think is that the large proportion of my 500 voters are pretty upset and sad and devastated at what happened to Charlie Kirk.
How could you not be?
At the core, it's because of his process, not his content. What people are saying is this is someone who was a public figure who wanted to engage, who just wanted to sit and have conversations with people and hear what they had to say, and then, of course, tell them that they were wrong. But that squashing that and making an example of that is just absolutely horrible. The second thing they're all saying, like Barbara, is, and the other side is absolutely unacceptable, the way they're responding to all of this.
Right.
So, I'll get voters, and I think you have some quotes here. I hear, the other guys are mean, they're celebrating this.
Right.
Or, on the flip side, the other people are, saying that, this person was perfect and we're out, we're going to go to the streets and we're going to start killing everyone. There's just such high anxiety. And what I think we have two options. One is that it gets worse. And the other is that we get some way to have leaders who help us turn down the heat. And we're at a tipping point.
Diane, I remember when Facebook became big, and Mark Zuckerberg used to run around saying, oh, this is going to transform the world. This will open up all sorts of opportunities for engagement and it'll all be so wonderful. Well, of course, it's turned out to be the opposite of that. He's a chief culprit with his unwillingness to moderate the algorithm or to take any responsibility for anything. So maybe the answer is the opposite, is to disengage, at least over this medium, in the way that schools now are saying to kids, you're just going to put your phone in this pouch at the beginning of the day. No phone during the day. Your parent needs to reach you, they can call the office. I mean, I think that's a positive step forward. What about you?
I think it's a positive step forward. Of course, how are you going to do it with adults?
Yeah.
It's hard to do that. And look, that's why I think a lot of my voters feel that things are going to get worse. Because if you look at the trends, Facebook is going to be benign relative to what you can get from artificial intelligence, et cetera. And look, there are also benefits. There are the benefits that Mark Zuckerberg talked about, being connected to each other.
Yeah.
There are enormous benefits to artificial intelligence, but we need to figure out a way for Americans to be more skeptical and more curious about where what they're reading is coming from. Because when you feel that the other side is radical, that's where my data says, actually, that's not happening. And this is not just about Charlie Kirk. This is some Republican voters saying all the Democrats want to do is defund the police, when in fact, that's not the case, you know, or vice versa. So we have to be much, much better at understanding what we're looking at and checking on who we're really listening to.
Or else any real opportunity for communication vanishes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Unfortunately, I've run out of time. I had many more quotes here, but I urge people to read your book and to probe a little bit deeper, as you're suggesting, Diane. Thank you.